Okay, good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're beginning the discussion today. My name is Radhika, and I work with National Foundation for India, one of the collaborators of the program. The SDGs agenda, as we all know, is a very expansive and ambitious agenda. Hence, through this dialogue, we will focus on the critical goal 17, which is setting up partnerships for development. Also, in order to practice sustainability, we have avoided the use of plastic bottles, and water is available at the back of the room. Kindly bear with us. We have also avoided wastage of paper by not printing the program agenda and the details on the speakers. For more information, please feel free to contact the registration desk. Without further ado, may I now invite the Honorable Consul General of Norway, Madam Anne Ollestad, to kindly address the gathering.
Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to Rethinking Business 2030. We will have 2 plenary sessions and 1 open forum, and I will leave it to my good dear friend, Banik, to explain how the whole thing is organized. My role here is to talk a little bit about Norway. And the CG, the Consulate General, and as probably some of you know, I was former ambassador to India for 5 years in Delhi. But now I am in wonderful Mumbai, a very different city from Delhi. And when I'm explaining to my politicians and friends in Norway, I always say Mumbai has more in common with New York than with New Delhi. And I really think that's very, very important to have in back of your mind. Mumbai is different. Both cities are extremely important for Norwegian interests. But my main goal is to promote Norwegian business in India. And this seminar is a very good example of how the activities in Mumbai is organized, seen from the CG's point of view. The Sustainable Development Goals with societal progression, environment, and economic development are an integral part of the Norwegian government and businesses. And our Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, recently signed an MOU with Prime Minister Modi on marine partnership and blue economy, which is really one of our main priorities in our collaboration with India, is blue economy. And all we are doing, we are promoting sustainability in our foreign policy here in India. We've also just signed an MOU on combating marine littering, which is also extremely relevant when you stay here in Mumbai. And our partners in organizing this seminar is the University of Oslo, National Foundation for India, and Samhita Social Ventures, whom are doing important work in research, societal development, and CSR. And what we are really, looking into, Dan was asking me, what do you want to get out of this seminar? And I think it's extremely important with the academic sort of backdrop, but I think also it's extremely important to come up with some concrete sort of how to move forward for the businesses when it comes to implementing the CSRs. It's very easy to stand here and talk about it. It's very different when we really have to implement it on the ground. So that's what I would like to see coming out of this seminar. And we know that in this room, there are many very prominent figures with different backgrounds and expertise. So I look really forward to take on business practices for a sustainable future, as well as how business can implement the idea of inclusion to leave no one behind. Hopefully, we can share our challenges and experiences and put action behind our words. I really, really look forward to this seminar, And now I give the floor to... Oh, you want to introduce? Okay. She is the MC. The CG is not the MC. No, that's true. So, please, the floor is yours. Thank you. But thank you. I really look forward to the seminar. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Madam Ollestad. We now move forward to the first plenary session on business practices for a sustainable planetary future. It is my pleasure to introduce and welcome to the dais the panelists of the session. May I invite Ms. Kristine Anvik Leach, Managing Director for Jotun, India. Mr. Anirban Ghosh, Chief Sustainability Officer for Mahindra Group. Mr. Raj Gupta, CEO of Lowe Lintas. Mr. Ajay Menon, General Manager, India and Asia Pacific, Gelato. Mr. Sudhir Shenoy, CEO and Country President, Dow India of Dow Chemical International Private Limited. Ms. Namita Vikas, Group President and Global Head, Climate Strategy and Responsible Banking with Yes Bank. I would now like to invite and welcome the moderator of the session, Professor Banik, Director of the Oslo SDG Initiative, Center for Development and Environment, University of Oslo, and Professor of Political Science.
Thank you, Radhika. I've been given special permission to take this plastic bottle because apparently I can't have a glass here on this table, so please forgive me. I'm delighted to be here. I was born in India. I've spent most of my life in Norway, so I feel delighted to be back here and represent both cultures in many ways. I thought I'll give, we have a fantastic panel here today. I thought I'll give a brief overview of some of the issues that we're working on in the Oslo SDG initiative. I have affiliations in Oslo, at Stanford, in China, in Africa, and we're seeing something wonderful happen. Never before have I seen so much enthusiasm from the private sector on development. And this is all due to the 2030 Agenda and the 17 SDGs. But for a long time, and it isn't just 2015 when the SDGs came into motion, but for a long time, there's been a lot of discussion and agreement on the close linkages between business, ethics, economic development, sustainable development. And so all of you, of course, are familiar with this overarching umbrella term of corporate social responsibility. And there have been all kinds of academic and policy-making terms that have been used, ethical cooperation, corporate citizenship, you name it. Some of this interest has been because of external demand. Sometimes it's also domestic factors. You have new companies exploring new markets, deeper footprints in fragile and very poor contexts. You have activistic CEOs talking about the fact that it's not just businesses should not just be focusing on profits, but also doing something else. You have activist NGOs, you have citizens demanding better accountability. So there's been that kind of stuff, and the UN and many international processes have facilitated this increased role of businesses in social and economic development. So you've had the UN conferences in Rio in '92, in Johannesburg. You've had the UN Global Compact being established in 1999. And then you've had the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008. All of this created this need for greater integration of businesses in wider societal development. And then something magical happened in 2015. But before that, something wonderful happened in 1987, and that's where the Norwegian bit comes in. Our former Prime Minister, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, chaired a commission, and that very influential report, Our Common Future, launched this whole idea of sustainable development, that it is not just about what we're doing for our current generation. Our development should keep in mind the needs of future generations, even unborn generations. But sustainable development as a concept ebbed and flowed. It really didn't catch on. I know some of my American friends were, oh, this is very wishy-washy. And it was then in 2015, after a long consultative process where many business leaders were consulted, one ended up with the 2030 Agenda. Where are we now? Well, everybody says that this is great, it's wonderful, and the one sector that has really embraced, it's not governments, yes, you have India and China and some others who've really embraced the SDGs, but it's the businesses all over the world. And I think that is just something unique. I've never seen businesses embrace development as much. So what are the arguments? Well, they're saying the businesses are great because we can't fund things on our own. We need money. And so there's a business case, opportunities. We talk about innovation, job creation, you name it. There are trillions of dollars. This is the report from the Business Commission. Lots of reports are saying, just connected with specific SDGs, there are trillions of dollars of business opportunities, including in India. Then there's the moral case. You have Paul Polman in Unilever, even you have Anand Mahindra, talking about the fact that it is something about giving something back. It is not just about making money, it is about making sure that one reaches the most vulnerable. It's about interacting with governments and policymakers, etc. SDGs, the implementation, and we've been following the process globally in the UN and also in international forums, progress has been slow. But what everybody seems to say is that businesses have to play an important role. So there's a lot of celebration, a lot of applause. Everybody says this is important, but what there hasn't been much of a discussion in some of these forums is how do you actually operationalize the rhetoric into reality? Everybody seems to agree, and I chair many such sessions and discussions with business leaders. In China, we have major Norwegian companies adopting it, major Indian companies very much in the field. A lot of people say this is important, but we don't really discuss the concreteness, what is happening, but also addressing some of the criticisms. Can you sacrifice profit for sustainable development? Where is the tolerance level? And we'll come back to some of these issues. So let me not spend more time on this very abstract general introduction and engage the panel. And I'm really grateful to the organizers, the Consulate, Samhita, and NFI for getting this excellent panel together. It's gender representation, sectors, we've covered it all. So I want to start with Namita, Vikas here. I'm a big cricket fan, by the way, so I remember Yes Bank, which is apparently the 4th largest private bank in India. You used to sponsor this is something I have from my Indian genes, cricket and Indian food. So the Yes Bank sixes in the IPL, so I remember that. But I was reading this very impressive report from 2018, and your CEO says that the role that you have as a financial institution, that you wish to actually play a catalytic role in India's development. And this is where the interesting thing comes. India has a lot of developmental challenges, environmental challenges, and you see as a financial institution playing that catalytic role. How are you doing that?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dan. To answer your question, I think you started off very well by saying that there are trillions of dollars that are required to meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and that estimated figure is $90 trillion. India alone requires $960 billion US per year to meet the SDGs up to 2030, right? So we saw a lot of opportunity, and this kind of requirement is not going to be fulfilled by the charitable or the social capital that is available. Mainstream institutions have to step in, and therefore integrating the overall sustainable development goals or the approaches towards it into our strategy became very important for us. And we started this process right from 2013. I mean, right since inception, we looked at responsible banking as a core, element of our overall approach to our bank strategy. And thereon, we said, how do you build on products which are mainstream products? So I will come to the CSR work that I do, but what I want to highlight here, and where you said, it's not about compromising on, the perception is when we talk about social, it's either social or green. When we talk about these two aspects, it's either expensive or it's subsidized. And that's the perception. And we said that we will break that myth by bringing in products which are mainstream products, mainstream financial products, which will not be expensive and not be subsidized, and that they will be competitive at market rate. So can I give you an example here? Yeah, so last 5th of June on the World Environment Day, we launched a retail product, which is a fixed deposit product. So everybody, all of us here invest in fixed deposits. And this was India's first green future deposit, as we called it. It paid the highest rate of interest, we committed to the depositor that we would plow the entire capital, the proceeds from that particular product, into green or social finance that we do. And we would plant trees for every individual who invested in that product. And believe me, under 50 days, we had 1,000 crores worth of deposits in the bank. And this was paying the highest rate of interest in comparison to the market rate. So I think it is all about mainstreaming products, and that gives the catalytic approach to the overall, how do you meet the goals agenda.
But you also have a very concrete focus on, say, safe drinking water. You have solar power, renewable energy. How do you choose these sectors?
So when we looked at water, we said what is very material for a financial institution like a banker. So financial inclusion is the number one materiality as far as a bank is concerned. And if we have to bring in that last mile laborer into our fold, then he has to be healthy, his children need to go to school, and he has to have a livelihood. And for that, water as an intervention was a very important area for us, right? So we worked around water. That was also because we, as a sector, we wanted to enter into it as a mainstream product line, right? What we do is we also look at how do we use our CSR dollars to be able to create a market or a product for itself. So when we entered in 2013 into water as a sector, we looked at safe, clean drinking water, and we looked at which areas do you have captive population, and we looked at railway stations, therefore. So along with the Indian Railways, we took a commitment, it was a COP21 commitment that we took to provide access to 100 million people with safe, clean drinking water through 1,000 railway stations, and we've just about met that target. So today, 90 million people across 10,000 locations on railway stations are having access to safe, clean drinking water. What I want to highlight here is the option was to go with a RO system that is available out there, which purifies water, but we chose this very interesting technology which purifies water up to 100%, zero electricity and zero waste. So that's the technology that we have used to be able to create that impact. So it's all about which are the sectors that we want to enter in terms of our own financing is concerned. And that's how we look at...
Great. We'll come back to some of these issues. Let me start with the other side. Mr. Ghosh, I'm sorry, you just started drinking your tea. But I was thinking, because this has this, the link to the CSR thing. I've actually seen YouTube videos of Mr. Ghosh. And one of the things you say is that it is really important not just to think about work as a single company, we need partnerships, right? And then Anand Mahindra has been saying in Davos, etc., that we really, he says he's obsessed with profit, right? So sustainability without that profit incentive is not sustainable. That seems to be the message. So my question to you really is, so where do you see CSR now? Are we seeing a new phase of CSR? Are we talking about CSR 2.0? Are we talking about CSR with sustainability characteristics? What is your impression?
When you started with Namita, I thought I was safe for another 20 minutes.
No, you're never safe.
Well, you've actually raised quite a few trade-offs in your original introduction, one of which you're raising again through the question. And trade-off, the one that you're talking about now, is make money or be sustainable. Actually, a corporation can't be sustainable if it doesn't make money, which is what Mr. Mahindra keeps saying. So what's changed really? Corporations have always needed to make money, and that hasn't changed now. So what's changed? See, in the course of development, there were 2 or 3 things that we seemed to do which were almost inadvertent but were taken for granted. For one, we believed that nature was abundant. We could use as much of it as we wanted and do whatever we wanted to it, and we would all survive well. We've learnt now that that is no longer true. Without saying so, the way we've lived lives has sort of followed a tenet which goes something like, everybody does not have to be treated well all the time. And that is what has resulted in all the inequalities and all the other problems in society that we are facing now. And there's a third one, which I think as we are taking climate action, we're kind of realizing that technology always has unintended consequences. We were delighted when automobiles were invented. We are not so delighted now. We were delighted when plastic helped us do many things. We are not so delighted now. Thermal power was supposed to be the solution to the availability of cheap power all over the world. We are not so delighted now. So every technology that we've been delighted with in the past is showing that it has some unintended consequences. The work in sustainability and CSR actually is almost, or the work in climate action, is almost to undo these unintended consequences. Of course, one hopes that in that process we don't create more unintended consequences. All of this leads to a new paradigm of better business, where we cannot continue to do business and ignore the environment and ignore communities and ignore the fact that technologies have unintended consequences. So there is a definition of sustainable business that we've adopted. It goes something like this: build an enduring business while rejuvenating the environment and enabling stakeholders to rise. This is a definition which tends to address all the dichotomies which you've been speaking of since the beginning of the session. And this actually raises the question, what really is CSR? Is it the distraction of 2% of your profits? Or is it the real change that you bring into the planet and communities? If you were to take the second as the definition, the conversation would get really broad, and I would spend hours trying to tell you what a group like Mahindra is trying to do in that space. So we'll stop with the understanding of the definition and let the conversation proceed.
So I know you want to drink your tea, but I'm not going to let you go right away. Something that fascinates me is that you're into solar energy, you're into electric cars, you're into aerospace. I mean, I've been doing a lot of homework on Mahindra. So what is it that you're not into? That's the question. And from my hotel room here, I could see that and I could see all the buildings in Mumbai. And it's pretty hot outside. I could only see one big building with a solar panel. None of the others had it. So that's something that has always intrigued me, with the middle class in India. The huge potential for attitudinal change, behavioral change. How do you get them to install solar panels? How do you get them to buy an electric car? You don't need a very big Tesla to drive from here to Colaba and back. A small electric car would do. So how do you change that perception among the Indian middle class?
So I just learnt in the morning that India is a country with the largest number of electric vehicles in the world. Surprising, right? It surprised me too. However, that is indeed true, because it was coming from a very credible government organization. Of course, that doesn't answer your question about how do you get the middle class to change their mindset. The good news is this. Between the conference here and the conference happening in the ballroom below, we have loads of people who would die to buy an electric car were it to be useful for them. Our belief is that the conversation on climate action has created a wonderful climate where lots of people will take action if alternatives are available to them.
Right.
And if they're able to figure out a way of making the alternative work for them. So there is a housing society where my colleague lives who have figured out a way how to use renewable energy, how to install it, and they've done it. And I live in a society which you probably can see from your window, which hasn't yet figured it out, but has started on that process. This conversation has indeed become very intense. And the answer to your question really is, as we are able to figure out how to do these things in a way in which it's feasible, we'll be happy to do it. Electric car sales are going up some 3 times in a year, but the base is very small. But as the value proposition for the vehicle increases, I'm sure the goal of doing 30% by 2030 will be more than achieved.
So this brings me to Norway, and I want to introduce or get Kristine into the conversation. So in Oslo, I mean, it's almost like Tesla shaming. I mean, everybody in my neighborhood has a Tesla, and it's like I'm the only one without a Tesla. There's a lot of pressure now. I think 60 or 70% of the new cars sold last month in Oslo were electric. So it's just a different thing. And there are lots of incentives and disincentives. So we can come back to this behavioral change. Kristine, you represent Jotun, or Jotun, as it's known here. And you make paint, powders, all kinds of stuff. My house is currently being painted with one of your brands, which you don't sell here, because that's only for the Norwegian weather. But you've been in the business here for 10 years, and you're actually making, an impression. What is your feeling? And you're heavily involved in investing in sustainable solutions. How different is it to work in, say, in Norway with some of this technology and a focus on sustainable development, and then come to India and do it? I'm not saying that Norway is teaching India, but there's a different context. What is your experience so far?
Well, I think the profile of Jotun worldwide is very much linked to sustainability. It has been since we kind of started in 1920 something, and we started to venture into Libya in the 60s, and we kind of went on this internationalization of the journey that we have. And yes, there has been associated challenges in terms of bringing that mindset into India. The way that Jotun grows is only organically. We don't buy, we don't acquire, we don't do joint ventures. We set up a factory. That's what we have here now. So the factory now was 10 years last year, and came in 2010. And the firm belief is that we want to bring kind of the culture of Jotun, and the mindset, sustainability being one of them. But we need to match it up with a respect and a care for also the local values that are here, which is why we only grow organically. We set up the site, build the factory, utilizing local workforce here. And that's exactly the same model that has been done in India. I think if you look at, because we manufacture, make in India, whatever we sell in India, we make here. So if you look at it from an outgoing point of view, obviously you need to get the customers to understand the sustainability angle, which is not necessarily the easiest. And if I could be as bold to say, as in a very cost-conscious market that India is, not a lot of people are willing to pay a little bit more to acquire that level of sustainability throughout the organization. Used to be that way. Now I feel that is very, very much changing, and the mindset of the customer, talking about big project customers as well as, the consumers and the homeowners, things are moving, and they're moving fast, which I guess tends to be the case in India. I guess the biggest challenge, if I can be quite practical about the implementation, is related more to kind of the inbound part, where we want to have an entire value chain that is local. We not just want to produce, but we also want to make sure that we have raw materials and we have indirect materials that can be sourced locally. And very often the challenge there relates to the HSE part, where we have such a stringent requirement because we don't necessarily focus and follow the local requirements. We focus and follow the European standards. And we then need to get the value chain to do the same. And that's always a bit of a challenge. And I think for me, and I've been here now for 2 years, it's been the question of how much responsibility should we take in the sense of getting that value chain up and running on the same focus on sustainability, if it's through health or safety or environment. And that's been a very practical,
So is it a matter of
challenge.
cost involved here? Is that the...
I think for many of the local suppliers, be it across the board, yes, there is an associated investment. There is an associated focus on it, and sometimes it's also the knowledge related to what the expectations are. And I think that I've landed on the fact that we need to take a responsibility here, because we have done this for so many years, that if we can work together with the value chain and kind of lift everyone up to the same level, I feel the process will go faster, and it will strengthen literally from A to Z when it comes to particularly manufacturing.
So this approach is independent of your competitors. I mean, there's something that you feel you should do in any case.
Yes.
So it's not a profit thing, is it?
For us, it can't be. I mentioned to you earlier about our chemical policy. We don't have a policy suited for India. We have a policy that is suited with the most stringent version that we have in Europe. And the thinking is very easy. if it's unhealthy for a Norwegian, it's also unhealthy for an Indian. And we cannot then compromise on that because we operate in a local market. But again, being able to implement that through the entire value chain, it's a bit of an operational challenge. Very much doable, but is not done overnight.
So let me bring Sudhir into the conversation. I'm told that Kristine is your customer. So you guys are
very
linked
good customer.
Here. Yeah. So in terms of DAO, and so one of the things that fascinated me, and I didn't know until recently, is that you have your own set of goals, 7 lofty goals that are termed 2025 sustainable, not 2030. And these actually came about in May 2015. That is before the SDGs came into effect in September, or were adopted in September 2015. So my question is, how are your goals aligned with the SDGs, if they are at all? Or are you having your own agenda?
Actually, you just picked up on the third set of 10-year sustainability goals that we did, the most recent one being in 2015, so which goes on till 2025. So we call them our 2025 sustainability goals. But we started in 1995. And the way we started is, let me give you a little bit of background for those who don't know. I represent the chemical industries as brick and mortar as it gets, and polluting, and he talked about plastic, all the dirty things you can think about, you probably assign it with a company like ours, right? So we started in 1995 this journey where we first started to focus on what we call our footprint, just addressing the fact that we want to reduce the amount of emissions, effluents, power, raw material, waste that we generate, just to see how we can control that part of it. And that 10-year journey for us yielded, we invested about $1 billion in those 10 years. And we found out that we saved about $5 billion because we invested in better technology, better processes, and so on, right? So from there, we moved to the next 10-year goals that finished in 2005 to 2015, where we focused on what we then called our handprint, which we said we talk about developing products and technologies that are significantly better, have a lower carbon footprint or a better sustainability impact on the environment. So looking at developing new products and technologies and essentially even getting to a point where we have a mandate that any new product that we develop should be equal or better to whatever else it's going to replace. So we will not develop a new technology that is worse for the environment than the incumbent technology or the incumbent product that exists. And the latest set of 10-year goals that we came up with in 2015, which now talks about a blueprint, is for us to lead the advocacy of getting the entire ecosystem to move in a fashion where sustainability, and this is clearly, all of those 7 goals are aligned to the SDGs. We have a subset of those goals in India because India is obviously very different. I can't just cut, paste global goals and apply it to our context. So we have, of course, they're aligned into the global goals, but they have very unique flavor of the Indian markets that we need to apply.
So how, and you were just mentioning this, how do you apply global blueprints that Dow has to the Indian reality? How does that translation, what is it that you leave out? Because Kristine was saying that, the Norwegian standard, whatever is good for Norway is good for India. Is there something that gets lost in that?
Also we have exactly the same, expectation that we apply the higher of the 2 standards, the Dow internal standard or the local regulation, as may be the case. I have yet to come across a place where the local regulation is more stringent than our internal standards. And that always puts us at a disadvantage. It's a much higher cost to comply. Our assets are significantly more expensive. Our conversion costs are higher. We still end up getting treated like everybody else does. Because as far as the regulators are concerned, they don't care if you are 40% below what they have allowed you to do, or somebody who's at actually 110% or 120%. They treat everybody the same. And with customers, it's hard for you to get a premium, as Kristine mentioned as well. The only thing I say we managed to get is a lot of respect and at least the last right of refusal on their business. That's the most that I can expect from a customer in the Indian context at this point in time. But for us to apply that in an Indian context, needs something very different. So just to give you an example, we have one goal around safe management practices for, we do a lot of hazardous and toxic chemicals. And India is a place which is, is an opportunity for an accident waiting to happen given the infrastructure. You have the road quality, you have the driver quality, you have. How do we bring in technology which is India-centric? I cannot bring in technology that is from the US where it's a completely different dimension. So we worked in partnership. Again, you cannot do these things in isolation, right? We cannot be we cannot be an oasis in the desert. It's not sustainable for us to operate like that. How do we bring in a coalition of companies that are partners? Even if we compete with each other in the marketplace, we can still ally with each other to develop some of these things. So we have an India-specific initiative, which we call, as an example, Nicer Globe, where we now have a fairly affordable technology for GPS tracking of every truck that moves with hazardous cargo anywhere in the country. I can real-time monitor, and now, as you know, technology has made these things affordable. So now we have a real-time emergency response center that can track and monitor where a truck is, if even have data analytics that tell us if the truck is taking longer than usual, if it's making unusual stop, if it is stopped driving in the night, which we do not permit, stuff like that. Because
so nipping it in the bud, I mean, as quickly as possible response, is that?
Yes.
Yeah,
so that's part of this, but we had to adapt it to the Indian conditions, given that drivers are illiterate. Truck quality, road quality is very poor. We still have a long way to go. We have to, even if you know that there is an accident, your ability to respond is a different matter altogether, right? Because the local authorities do not have the ability to deal with it. So we have to create our own capability.
Right. So, continuing on this global local, I think we'll introduce the other Norwegian company called Gelato. It's not what you think it is. It's not ice cream. It's not Italian ice cream. It is about shrinking our global footprint by printing locally. So, Mr. Menon, how does this work in practice? I mean, you're a software company.
That's right. We're a tech company.
Yeah.
And our offering is a cloud-based platform. So it's geographic agnostic. You can access it anywhere from any kind of device. And the whole purpose really is to help global companies be more efficient and be more sustainable in terms of their print management. I think when you look at industry after industry, they're all being digitized today. When you look at, for example, transportation, you look at hospitality or real estate, you look at logistics, all of it is being digitized. I think very little of that is happening in printing today or in print management until Gelato was born. So with what we have to offer is that we help companies reduce their shipping distances. They no longer have to print material at headquarters, let's say in Europe, and then transport it thousands of kilometers all the way over to India. There are lots of companies that we work with here in India that access their files over the platform, and they're able to order print collateral and have it delivered locally within days and within just a few kilometers. A great example actually is our partnership with Jotun. Jotun is a customer of Gelato, or rather a partner of Gelato. And earlier, Jotun would print a ton of collateral, print marketing collateral in the UK, ship it all the way to Santa Fjord, stock it in warehouses, and then when the Indian teams or certain other subsidiaries needed it globally, they would then ship minimum order quantities all the way across the globe. But today, those same marketing teams can now access the same digital assets over the Gelato platform, order for prints that are then printed and delivered right here in India within a couple of days and within just a few kilometers. An interesting fact is that in 2018, Gelato enabled Jotun to actually reduce the delivery distances for its print collateral by almost 373,000 kilometers, which is equivalent to a trip from the Earth to the Moon.
Right.
And
because the fact of the matter is that we're actually printing, we haven't reached that paperless society that, some of us thought we would. We're printing more globally than we are ever.
Absolutely. I think the misnomer is that people don't print. I think all companies don't have an idea in terms of how much they're actually printing. Today, the print industry is valued at about $870 billion. It is 60 times larger than recorded music industry and 3 times larger than the software industry. And when you look at digital printing itself, that's grown from 80 billion in 2008 to 180 billion in 2018. So print is definitely not dying. People are printing a lot more. And what we are trying to do is to get global companies be a lot more efficient and sustainable in terms of the way they print.
So, and your direct linkage to the SDGs is reducing transport costs?
Climate action, I would say, and definitely helping companies be more responsible in terms of their consumption and production as well.
What about the paper that is used?
It has to be recyclable paper. And also when we look at our own SDGs, I mean, we're still putting together our strategies in terms of how do we want to achieve our SDGs, including establishing internal goals that are all part of a broader sustainability framework that ties directly into our business model and our business strategy.
Okay. So I've asked Raj to wait and be patient because in many ways, you know, he represents this creative agency, the CEO, that helps companies communicate, that helps companies brand, that helps companies better understand what consumers want. So Raj, you've heard now 5 different perspectives, or similar and different sometimes. What is your take on this? How are you selling the idea? How are you selling brands? And what is your impression of the Indian consumer's interest in sustainable development?
So, Dan, before I come to that, just some comments on the outputs.
Okay.
One is, I've seen businesses that fall into 4 categories right now. There are businesses that conform because of law and CSR and things like that. There are businesses that are getting more committed. So there's a commitment bucket, and there is the conscious bucket, and there's a culture bucket. Okay. So in our own client set, there are businesses that have gone into culture. There are clients who are becoming conscious, and so on and so forth. They're at different learning curves and practice curves. I have been reading about sustainability for many, many years, thanks to Al Gore, who actually tipped it, right, in many ways. The progress has been certainly abysmally slow. Okay? And I don't think you're going to have very fast progress, because for any such progress to happen at the scale at which we are talking it should happen, you need a movement. And movements are caused not because of hope, they're caused because there's enough contempt built up in the society. So we've studied movements, and we found that for every movement movements are built on rage, because rage builds faster, hope takes long to ferment. And I think the entire industry has been trying to ferment hope. I think you're going to have a long, long time before you get into the act. There are many businesses that we have come across who you can ask them to do all kinds of things on sustainability. They'll say, ask me to do some good, but don't ask me to reduce harm. Okay, that's overall feeling. Okay. Having said that, there is some hope that we can look at, and that's the consumer. Okay. So where we are coming out on this is that unless it's law, and therefore you have to conform, okay, everybody will do it overnight, or consumers starts building up and building interest in this subject, or religion takes over. Okay. Having said that, most of our clients, and most of you I would imagine today, are actually getting disrupted by a couple of things. One, in our industry at least, we are getting disrupted by digital, and therefore there's a lot of focus, management focus on how to handle the digital disruption. And we are beginning to see another kind of disruption, which is amongst consumers. And consumers more and more study, and the most famous study in this is the Cantor study, okay, that of the WPP group, which says that consumers are now beginning to say, it's your job to keep me honest. So I may consume a packet of Lay's, but you make sure that I'm not dirtying the earth. So now when the consumer starts saying this, you're in trouble if you don't act on that. Okay? Having said that about the consumer and the disruption we're expecting from the consumer, there's also digital disruption. And we as an industry, advertising, marketing, communication, we have been used to for 50, 60, 70 years of pushing messages to people. It's always been one to many. That era is off. Okay, consumers pull messages now on digital. You can't push anything to them. Okay, you can't push anything to the consumer. Try to push something, the consumer skips it. So what have we found as a solution? And we found a sweet spot between pull and sustainability. And that spot is purpose. Because when we researched consumers, we found that consumers pull things that they are aligned to, either through their passion or purpose. That's what consumers pull. They don't pull ads. okay, unless the ad is aligned to their purpose, or unless the content is aligned to their purpose. And when we now have a framework for dissecting what purpose the client or the brand should address. And that starts with the extraordinary core of the company or the brand. Why was the brand born in the first place? Okay, so a brand like Lifebuoy, which is a carbolic soap, was born in the UK, was created by the Lever brothers then because there was plague there and to rid the plague situation. So it was born with a very, very strong purpose. What are the forever values of the companies? Are the companies not willing to give up those values? Okay, and what is the coming context? And whenever we research the coming context of a brand or a business, we found that sustainability has started creeping in, which is good news. But it's slow, but it's good news. Okay? And we have found that unless the product, brand or business, if the purpose has nothing to do with the consumer or the product benefit, it's not going to fly. And it should make money. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustainable. Please allow me to take you through 3 video clips right now. Okay? And these 3 are brands that we handle for many, many years. And they are also amongst the largest brands in India. And how we have partnered them on putting them on the road to sustainability. Because apart from businesses, we have a strong belief that the brands can change the world too. Okay? And have a look at this. Some of you, if you can't see it clearly, if you can just come forward. Sheena, can we play the 3 films?
உள்ளங்களிலே இன்பம் பெருகிட மனதில் நிறைகின்றான் ஆரோக்கியமும் அறிவும் பெற்று வளர்ந்துட்டானையா ஐயா ஆளொரு மேனியும் பொழுதொரு வண்ணம் என் மகன் வளருகிறான் உள்ளங்களிலே இன்பம் பெருகிட மனதில் நிறைகின்றான்
मेरा बच्चा 5 साल का हो गया।
इतना सब 5 साल में कौन सी बड़ी बात है?
बड़ी बात है मैडम, ये गुंडापा का पहला बच्चा है जो 5 साल की उम्र तक पहुंचा है।
क्या?
क्या है मैडम? पेपर स्प्रे. कोई तुम्हारे साथ funny behave करे ना? Straight in the eyes.
We all need one nowadays, huh?
तुम्हें भी अपनी सेफ्टी के लिए कुछ करना चाहिए.
हम काला टीका लगाते हैं.
काला टीका.
Like वो Purina sir types. Education problem, guys. छोड़ो ना. Actually, मैडम, educated लोगों को भी लगाना चाहिए काला टीका.
Oh really?
Excuse me.
जागोरे 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 जागोरे.
वोट किसी ऐसे नेता को दो जो हमारी सेफ्टी के लिए कुछ करे. सबके लिए चाहे.
हम 49% वोटर्स हैं. अपने मुद्दों के लिए वोट करो. 49 के पावर के लिए वोट करो. टाटा टी गोल्ड.
So while each one of these brands supported an SDG, whether it was health and well-being in Lifebuoy case, where we actually have a program that runs all across India, helping children wash their hands 5 times a day, educating them, and therefore saving life. A lot of children there because of diarrhea. Or it was Tanishq, which is the market leader as far as it comes to jewelry. And now Lifebuoy promoting that cause of washing hands 5 times a day has something to do with their business, you know, and it ties up and is aligned to the sustainability SDG, right? Or Tanishq promoting second marriage, which is marriage is the 85% of all jewelry sales in this country happens during marriage. So it has something to do with business also. And Tata Tea promoting women to go out and vote. Okay, women are the biggest constituents of Tata Tea. Okay. So each one of these SDGs were tied up with business goals. That's the only way. And it's not easy to come to that sweet spot where you can tie up an SDG with a business goal. But when you do get it, you get it right, it scales up. Okay. So
yeah.
So that's been our learning when it comes to brand and how brands can promote SDGs going forward.
So let's, I know we are running a little late and we'll soon open up for Q&A, but I was just wondering if the panel here would like to reflect on your sweet spots in your businesses. I mean, in terms of communicating, I asked you earlier, Mr. Ghosh, about attitudinal change. I mean, how do you go about making a convincing, a compelling argument? Namita, Anirban, whoever wants to.
Advertising people always have an advantage. They can show films.
Yes.
But I must commend Raj for the work that he and his agency have done in guiding brands in the area of sustainability. Something very important. I mean, it was very interesting for you to say religion, rage, regulation. That will bring change. Of course it will. Question, and of course rage causes more change than hope does. Question is, what makes rage happen? Rage typically happens through scarcity. That's how the Bolshevik Revolution happened. That's how the French Revolution happened. And that's what is happening in the space of sustainability as well. Because we are increasingly moving to a world with scarcer clean water, with scarcer clean air, and with actually a whole lot of scarcer materials. If I could share with you a picture, I would, which is of the periodic table, which shows when each of the metals will no longer be available in virgin form. And that's why the story of sustainability is so very strong. The fact that scarcity of various things is creeping up on us. And that's what is driving the shift which Raj mentioned is slowly gathering steam. And that's what gives us belief that we may consider it slow now, but there is a tipping point which is not too far away. And what happened in UK some time ago, what happened in France a little while ago, and actually there was a program I saw at New York last month. It was a music program, but the impression it left me with, that if this is the intensity of interaction, it won't take long for this to land up on the streets. UK happened a week later, but it'll probably happen here as well. So communication and getting people to get going with a sense of the scarcity which is impending, some of us are experiencing it in some ways today, is a powerful way to make it happen.
So, I think scarcity is absolutely crucial. I would actually add a couple of more. I would say visibility. Proximity, where is it happening? How visible is a disaster? And these are things that get people's attention, but it can't be too far away. It has to be in the neighborhood. So you to feel that you can relate to this. And we've seen this in terms of many things in India and also elsewhere. But I do think that scarcity is important. Christina and Namita, whoever wants to.
Yeah, sorry, it was just related to the, in terms of the sweet spot. So before I came to India, I was a regional marketing director covering all of Southeast Asia and obviously working towards a very similar approach. And I think our biggest learning, although sustainability is a strong force, it's not currently strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet, in the sense that you need to deliver on the brand promise first, on the core qualities of your product, and then the sustainability factors become a secondary part. I think the importance as a secondary part is on the increase, and we saw that in Southeast Asia. We launched, going back a few years, our most expensive paint, but the story was only around sustainability.
Right.
And very practical from a paint point of view, what we saw was that people didn't paint to stay sustainable. They painted because they wanted a beautiful looking home. And that needs to be the core attribute. And I'm not sure that will ever change, but I think the importance of the sustainability becomes on the increase. So we relaunched it, focusing on the perfect home, but with a care element, as in the health of your family, the sustainability of all of the materials. And all of a sudden, sales were doubled, because the story was told in a different way.
Right. But some of those things change too. I mean, we don't necessarily always want new clothes. It may become fashionable, as in many parts in Norway, to wear secondhand. Right?
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
our understanding of beauty and decoration also changes, don't you think?
I think our standards of beauty changes, but I don't think we're willing to compromise on the beauty to obtain the sustainability always.
Okay.
And I think that will be an interesting fact going forward.
Namita?
I think just
So-
to
Raj, Namita's first. Yeah.
So, when I was thinking of this sweet spot, I think for a banking sector, it's a plain vanilla business where it's all about giving out loans and earning interest and ensuring that the capital comes back. It's all about risks and opportunities. And that fine balance between risk and opportunities is where your sweet spot is. I would just like to share a very interesting example here. So conventionally, if you look at women borrowers, their default rate is very low. So the default rate among women borrowers is about 2.5%. And therefore, we looked at this particular model of blended finance.
Yeah.
And that is linked to, so if you look at the run of Kutch in Gujarat, there are 48,000 women who are making salt in the heat of 52 degrees centigrade. And their overall income, the season starts in September, goes up to April, and their income is about 25,000 rupees of 7 months, because they have to borrow from money lenders at about upwards of 36% rate of interest, anywhere between 36 to 100%, because they don't have access to formal credit. So what we did was we worked with a local bank to provide, and one important area was that the input cost to this whole salt making process was diesel that they burned to do the process, So we worked with a local bank to move 600 women from diesel pumps to solar pumps on the back of finance that this local bank would give on a kind of a grant credit guarantee that we put aside. We did an interest subvention. The local bank would charge 13% rate of interest, so we did an interest subvention of 8% and a kind of a capacity building grant for enabling these women to learn how to use it, so on and so forth. What we saw was, in the first season that we intervened, their income went up from 25,000 to 72,000 rupees. So that was like almost 3 times of the income that they would have otherwise made. And yes, because it's cleaner, diesel pumps are not emitting carbon dioxide, so that's cleaner. And that overall livelihood parameter went up. Now, what as a bank we're looking at is, we found a midway between risk and opportunity. And now we're talking to the IFCs of the world to look at bringing in this patient grant capital for institutions like us to tap that 48,000 world that is out there. So I think that's really about how do you find that exact balance, which would be very important to look at.
Raj, you wanted to respond?
To build on your tipping point philosophy, I think one of the reasons why India got its freedom, because there was a strategist out there in this whole Swaraj movement who didn't take up anything. He took up salt to go after. Okay? There's a reason why he took up salt after the salt tax was levied, because salt connected with every consumer household in this country, every woman, every man, every child. Now, if you find, and it doesn't always have to be huge rage, so if you find that tipping point, the tipping point need not be about burning down cities and so on and so forth. Okay, you can find a tipping point even in something like salt, which was actually salt that happened when we analyzed it. And yeah, so going forward, we will be looking for the tipping point. We will be looking at learning from these movements and how to take it forward. But somewhere down the line, we do certainly need a movement to get us that scale and speed. That's all I was saying.
Sudhir, you've been a little out of the conversation for a while, so I need to get it. Oh, you do. But I also was thinking if you could reflect a little bit on partnerships, because you were talking about this blueprint and partnerships. And I read this interesting because we saw the Lifebuoy advert. Apparently, you've had this collaboration with Unilever, right? In terms of...
Actually, I was very happy to see the Lifebuoy ad, because actually we were awarded by Unilever for partnering on the Lifebuoy product development. You see, we are a chemical company, and chemistry impacts 95% of products that are manufactured. So in that sense, we look at ourselves as the toolkit for sustainability to enable every process to move to a far more sustainable alternative. But going back to the context we were talking about rage and about visibility or scarcity, I think a great example that everybody here in the room will relate to is plastic. Yeah. Plastic pollution, I go to the beaches on Sundays to clean up, and I feel rage. We are the largest plastic company in the world, by the way. Although we don't participate in single-use plastic, but we are as guilty as anybody else, right? The entire industry, the whole value chain is guilty for decades to wait, and even today to a degree, we wait for the business case to emerge. And now, just literally overnight, the business case has emerged because you have a gun to your head. Everybody is talking about banning plastics. There are videos of dolphins or fish dying, right? And you are now in the midst of all of that, having to deal with this and having to respond. Everybody is looking to somebody else. We are the manufacturer of pellets. We will look at the brand owner who goes, the Unilevers of this world or the Mahindras of this world or whoever else goes to the eventual brand owners. The reality of our situation is that no one constituent is capable of addressing the magnitude of this issue. The reality also is that even educated elites do not understand that the issue is one of behavior. The issue is not, plastic is the most sustainable material in the world even today, despite the fact that your beaches are littered and your streets are littered. The alternative is far worse from a sustainability footprint in 90% of the cases at least, if not 100% of the cases. So just go back to our childhood, we used to buy milk in glass bottles. Can we today go back? Can you imagine the amount of refrigeration energy, the amount of payload that you can carry in a truck which has glass bottles, amount of breakage, having to send back the water that you will waste to clean up? You cannot imagine. It's orders of magnitude worse. But yet, the immediate response comes back to say, let's ban plastic, right? And this is where the partnership becomes critical, because unless you can work together through the entire value chain to address something of this magnitude, and it has to be a multifaceted approach. I mean, you have to look at cleaning up, at the same time you're looking at behavioral change, at the same time you're looking at bringing in technology allows the plastic to be recycled. So circular economy.
What is the catalytic factor that actually starts this process of coalition building, partnerships? Is it the legalistic? Is it legal compliance? Is that the single most important driver?
Unfortunately, as it turns out in many of these cases, that is the regulatory drivers or the visibility to the average person, your brand, the impact that it has on your brand does become the rage that we talked about creates, is unfortunately what in an ideal world, you would be thinking far ahead. So we are learning our lessons, and although there are things that are not on the radar today of regulators or the public, we know those are issues. As just as a simple example that you may not realize, that we are a big producer of raw material that goes into making the mattresses that you sleep on. Every year, the number of mattresses that are disposed, I'm giving you an example from Europe, if you were to stack them on top of each other, is higher than Mount Everest. Disposal of that is a big issue, and it is a problem waiting to happen. Right. we cannot wait till we get to that point.
Okay, thank you. It's already 20 past, so why don't we open the floor for questions and comments? I suggest we take 3, 4 at a time. We have around 10, 12 minutes. So, and we have some assistance in terms of the microphone. So, any questions? I would, the gentleman at the back, right at the back, on my right. Please just raise your hand so that I know where you're sitting.
So, hi everyone. This was a very engaging and interesting conversations that we had. A couple of points that have come across, but considering the time constraint, I'll probably have 2 questions at this point of time. Mr. Ghosh and Mr. Shenoy, probably both of you spoke on few of the aspects. Maybe these questions are related to that. One of the pieces, Mr. Ghosh, that you mentioned is a fast-changing environment, and looking for an alternative for customers that probably they will adapt to. A lot of, if you hear a lot of talks about the future and, from the futurists, they're saying that we are changing at a very rapid pace, and which is a fact. I think what's probably happening today, or what probably people as a skill sets or, assets that they possess, probably 5 years down the line, that probably might not be really important at all. Automation, robotics, a lot of things are picking up, a lot of, jobs, a lot of, innovations are coming across. With respect to that, electric cars that you mentioned about, obviously people are looking for options in terms of, going from the conceptual or the, the old ways of your motor cars to electric and shift to the electric cars. What's the, what would be that, probably if I used the right word, how will you leverage the customers within the country like India, which has 1.3 billion population, to get, to move from their regular, vehicles to an electric car, considering the fact, the most part of it, because people here are very well, they impersonate the Western culture. They want the luxury. People are moving towards that. The scale of, selling money or, the opportunity that in terms
right.
of...
So can we just round it up, your question? You had another, you said 2?
How exactly would you try to impact that, wherein the people's perception or mindset will change from moving from a normal luxury to an electric vehicle, irrespective of the distance or whatever it is?
Okay, surprising. Anne? Yeah, the Consulate General, I think.
Dan, you were talking about the middle class.
Yes.
One of the biggest changes seen from my perspective, from when I was in India last time to coming to Mumbai now, is a growing young middle class, very, very active down on the beaches, picking plastics together with Altrasha. We work very closely with him. And we also see in Europe, youngsters, they are really fed up with the older generation.
Yes.
And the pull factor and, the push and pull, they are also fed up with, that way of approaching this. They want another sort of sustainability approach. Are they really, could they hurt business? That they don't want to buy all this crap coming from China or wherever, which is inexpensive but very, very polluting. I think we see some trends, at least in Europe, and also I think here. I'm very impressed about this young middle class that's now taking over many of the family businesses. It's very, very interesting to see how they are sort of entrepreneurs of a new India. Are you really in touch with this new generation? That's my question.
Okay. Now all the hands are coming. So the gentleman there, yes, with the blue shirt.
We were talking about solar energy as a renewable source which could bring about sustainability. Now the problem about solar energy and its systems is that it is not cost effective. I think that was earlier the government of India had a subsidy for installation of solar pumps by farmers. Incidentally, I was heading the vertical in NABARD which used to release these subsidies. And then that particular subsidy had to be stopped because there was no uptake from the farmers. Why? Now, if I remember well, the cost of a solar pump for a farmer was around 4 lakhs. With a 50% subsidy, it used to come to 2 lakhs. Now, when he can get a diesel pump for 20 to 30,000, I think it did not work out for him optimally. And you can't, and people used to say they should think about environment. And a man cannot think about environment on an empty stomach when he doesn't have 3 square meals a day. So obviously he's go for a diesel pump. So I think this aspect needs to be tackled. The cost. I think Ms. Namita, when she said about the women in Kutch, maybe you had a community approach to the solar pumps. But individually, it is not financially feasible. That is what I feel. This aspect needs to be considered.
The lady in front here, the microphone here, Kaya. Okay. We'll just quickly, please be brief, and because we're running out of time.
Thank you. Very interesting panel. So in the CSR literature, there's a concept named the CSR ladder, where the last step is working within the ecosystems to kind of create a larger change that is seen as kind of the ultimate level of CSR. I was just wondering whether you see that the SDGs have contributed to facilitating that kind of both inter-industrial dialogue, but also dialogue between sectors to address sustainability issues, or if we would see the same kind of dialogue in any case due to issues you've mentioned, such as scarcity of materials and others. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And the lady in green? Oh, yeah. Oh, you're two. Yeah. First her and then you. Oh, okay.
I just wanted to raise, a lot of time when companies are becoming much more conscious on many of the factors on SDG, the fundamental thing that SDG is really talking about is the inequality that exists. And is there a way to go beyond your particular market, your particular product, to really challenge like we are talking about, so many SDG goals that are there on inequality, on poverty. So is there a way in which we can, with profit not being compromised, is there a way to be able to engage in that whole process? And I think for us who are not into business, this is the biggest challenge as to how do we get business to look beyond profit. And a lot of time it is like Sir said, that it is within the framework of a particular product line or the company's values, which is fine. And a lot of time the CSRs are also within the framework of what is the marketing strategy. Can we go beyond that to really talk about it?
Okay, and one final question, because I'm told we are absolutely out of time.
Yeah, not a question, but a comment and 3 small comments.
Oh my God, that's...
Please, don't mind. One is, the film which you showed, I think that Tanishq film, because that was very interesting and it was the first of its kind. So I was heading the economics department at Bombay University, and I had a screening of this in my human development and my gender development economics class. And the first reaction, of course, it's gold and jewels, so it's not about stereotyping, because that is the product. So the comment was not about that. The comment was that the second marriage component, that the child was a girl. Because generally, in the stereotyping and what happens in the patriarchal community, and that's, I think, where some kind of, research, I think, becomes much more necessary when one does these kinds of issues, that if it was a boy, that girl would not have been able to get remarried. And that is something which is very common, so it's taking the name forward. That was one component. The second is on the issue of... I just want to add to that. No, can I?
Raj,
okay,
we can wait for the response. Yes, please, just very quickly.
Which is...
no, it's my show, so I have to make sure everybody is in line.
So should I stop now?
Just one more. You had 3 comments. Can you do the second very quickly?
Another issue was that of environment, and there was this comment about behavioral. Of course, behavioral is extremely important, but there's also a certain thing like a policy responsibility. So when we talk about Skill India, Make in India, Clean India, it's also a state responsibility to see, and a corporate responsibility to see that affluence, etc. are not there. So in terms of, say, whether it's a coastal road we are talking about or any other kind of issue.
Thank you.
The third, which I'm just bursting to say, is that we've had, I think women's issues have already come about. I'm just wondering if it is possible, like we have a carbon footprint and somebody talked about a handprint. Can we also judge CSR through what I call a gender print? If that is something which can be incorporated into strategies and...
I just wish to assure you that there will be a lot of time to talk during the break too. So just so that. So 1 minute for 6 of you in whichever order you wish. Just 1 minute, because I'm told we're absolutely out of time. Namita, why don't you start?
So I will take the gender gap. think the youth today has become more and more sensitive, and that's also because it has access to internet, social media. Unlike us, we didn't know what happened on the other parts of the world. And it is, again, a part of education and a demand and supply. That's how I would put it. Because the youth is more educated on matters of sustainability and how it's going to affect them, they're demanding that corporations come up with cleaner products or cleaner footprint. And I think if there is more demand, which is linked to education, then corporations would also behave in a particular manner. So that's my thought on the generation gap.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so precise. You've saved us 30 seconds. Yes, Ajay.
Just to pick up on the topic of partnership. So, at Gelato, we don't own a single print production center. So we don't produce anything, we don't print anything. But given that there's a dearth of printers out there globally, we partner with printers globally to be able to enable companies to print and deliver locally. So I think in the spirit of partnership and helping support companies and achieving their SDGs, that's what we're doing across the world.
Great, thanks. Raj?
In every business, you ask the head of the company, what gives you sleepless nights? What gives me sleepless nights is if the Arab civilization, 3,600 years old, could be brought down in 36 days, brands and businesses can be brought down much faster if we don't get our act together thanks to the internet.
Okay, Kristine.
You just gave me some more time now, right? Because you were very fast. One was related to the solar panels, because we're building a full feasibility study to make our manufacturing site completely solar driven, and I struggled to get the ROI to add up. So then I made the call to Norway to say, we need to make a decision here. Is this a route that we want to go down? Because from an ROI point of view, I'm not sure that I can get the numbers to add up. And then it becomes a different discussion from more of a sustainability, responsibility point of view, as opposed to purely the financial figures. So that was just to that. In terms of, you spoke about the inequality part and how can we, take the poverty and, on that part. And I think we work very consciously together with our customers, which is very often painters that are uneducated, that are supporting a large family. And we have a very conscious approach in making sure that, one, they're paid very, very fairly, but also to impose competency so that they get and receive a skill that they can live off and be proud of and really make sure that they feel that they have a tangible profession as opposed to just something that they do when there's no other jobs around, in a sense, to build the pride through the painters as a profession, in a sense, lifting that entire part. And then we can speak on the gender part during the break.
Okay. Sudhir?
Thank you. It's such a wide spectrum, it's hard to figure out what to do. So I'm just going to address the question of profit motive, I think comes up very frequently in the context of sustainability. And I think the business case for sustainability for the most part already exists. It's a question of the lens through which you are viewing it, whether you're looking at it from a long-term perspective, whether you're looking at it from a license to operate perspective. And the other piece that I think gets missed out very frequently is a life cycle analysis concept. It's not just about, so even for me, and I'm going to be a little controversial, but the electric vehicles is yet to be proven in my sense, whether on a life cycle basis, if it is carbon positive or negative. So this is something that's important for companies, and I think more and more non-financial reporting is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the lexicon for every company. So I think it will drive greater and greater sustainability behavior despite the profit motive. Okay.
Thank you.
Before I get started, Sudhir, remind me to send you the right reports on electric vehicles. Okay, we asked the same question in 3 different contexts: paint, solar pumps, and electric cars. The question was, will people adopt sustainability if it is a little bit more expensive? Actually, I don't think that's the real question. You'll see underlying the question, there are 2 kinds of sustainability: people sustainability and planet sustainability. Every time a person is making a decision, the primary thing is always about sustainability of the self, the family, the wallet, and so on. And that always trumps planet sustainability. Any new product, simply because it's more sustainable, will not be adopted unless it solves the problem that the product was originally meant to solve anyway. And that's something that Raj deals with every day in his profession. And that is where I think this conversation gets linked to rethinking business for 2030. Because that's the way we need to find solutions, which are not just good for the planet, but also good for the people for whom they are being built. Even in a country like Norway, clearly an outlier when it comes to, outlier on the positive side when it comes to
Thank you.
environment action. Adoption of electric vehicles was spurred by probably the best subsidy program in the world. And I remember a conversation in New York where I'd said, look, if you give that much subsidy to our electric cars, the car would be free. And I don't know whether people would still adopt it, but nevertheless. So we have to understand that products, as they become sustainable, will need to solve the problems that they were created for anyway. And that is what gives us the opportunity to rethink business.
Thank you. I just want to add that it is also clean energy, cheap electricity that facilitates the electric car, uptake in Norway. So on that note, I think this has been an absolutely fantastic panel. There's a lot of things we haven't covered, but I hope we can do that during the break. And I would like to just request you to give them a warm hand. Thank you. So, Radhika.
Thank you very much. May I please invite Ms. Ollestad back to the stage to give away our tokens of appreciation to the speakers. And please join us with a round of applause to thank the speakers. So Ms. Namita Vikas from Yes Bank, Mr. Ajay Menon from Gelato, India, Mr. Raj Gupta from Lowe, Lintas. I think the round of applause can be louder. Thank you. Ms. Kristine Anvik Leach from Jotun, India. Mr. Sudhir Shenoy from Dow, India. Mr. Anirban Ghosh from Mahindra Group. Thank you very much. We now break for tea for 15 minutes. It's served right beyond that partition. So thank you.